Lieutenant Sarah Martinez never imagined that her quiet evening jog through the residential streets of Virginia Beach would turn into a fight for her life. The 28-year-old Navy SEAL had just completed a grueling 18-month deployment in Afghanistan, where she had served as part of an elite special operations unit. Her muscular frame, hidden beneath loose-fitting civilian clothes, bore the invisible scars of countless missions behind enemy lines. The setting sun cast long shadows across the suburban neighborhood as Sarah maintained her steady pace. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and, to any casual observer, she looked like just another fitness enthusiast getting in an evening workout. Few people in this quiet community knew that the woman jogging past their homes had spent the last year and a half conducting high-risk operations in some of the world's most dangerous territories. Sarah had always been different from other girls her age. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she was the daughter of a retired Marine sergeant who had instilled in her the values of discipline, courage, and service. While her classmates were focused on typical teenage concerns, Sarah was already setting her sights on a military career. She excelled in athletics, particularly swimming and long-distance running, and maintained top grades throughout high school. After graduating from the Naval Academy with honors, Sarah had set her sights on becoming one of the first women to successfully complete Navy SEAL training. The decision wasn't made lightly. She knew the physical and mental challenges would be unlike anything she had ever faced. The training was designed to break even the strongest candidates, and the failure rate was notoriously high. The 6-month basic underwater demolition course pushed Sarah to limits she didn't know existed. She endured freezing ocean swims, sleep deprivation, and physical challenges that left many of her male counterparts unable to continue. During the infamous Hell Week, where candidates get only 4 hours of sleep over 5.5 days while undergoing continuous physical and mental stress, Sarah drew on reserves of strength that surprised even her instructors. What set Sarah apart wasn't just her physical capabilities, though they were impressive. Her instructors noted her exceptional problem-solving skills under pressure and her ability to remain calm in chaotic situations. She had an intuitive understanding of tactics and strategy that couldn't be taught. Her marksmanship scores were consistently among the highest in her class, and she demonstrated a natural aptitude for close-quarters combat. After successfully completing SEAL training, Sarah was assigned to a special operations unit that worked closely with intelligence agencies on sensitive missions. Her first deployment took her to Eastern Europe, where she participated in reconnaissance missions that required her to blend into local populations. Her ability to adapt to different cultures and languages made her particularly valuable for these assignments. The Afghanistan deployment had been her most challenging yet. Sarah's team was tasked with gathering intelligence on high-value targets in remote mountainous regions. The work required long periods of surveillance, often in extreme weather conditions and hostile territory. She had participated in several direct action missions, including the rescue of kidnapped aid workers and the capture of terrorist leaders. During one particularly dangerous mission, Sarah's team had been ambushed while conducting a night raid on a compound suspected of housing chemical weapons. The firefight lasted for several hours, and Sarah found herself separated from her team in the darkness. Using skills honed through years of training, she managed to neutralize 3 enemy combatants while making her way back to the extraction point. Her actions that night earned her a Silver Star, though the details of the mission remained classified. Now, back home after that intense deployment, Sarah was trying to readjust to civilian life during her leave period. The transition was never easy for special operations personnel. The adrenaline and constant vigilance required in combat zones didn't simply switch off when returning to peaceful suburban environments. Simple activities like grocery shopping or jogging could feel strangely vulnerable after months of operating in hostile territory. As Sarah rounded a corner onto a quieter street lined with older homes, she noticed a dark sedan that had been following her for the past several blocks. Her training immediately kicked in, and she began mentally cataloging details about the vehicle and its occupants. The car was maintaining a consistent distance behind her, matching her pace rather than simply passing by. 3 men sat in the vehicle, their faces partially obscured by baseball caps and sunglasses despite the approaching darkness. The driver appeared to be in his 30s with visible tattoos on his arms. The passenger seemed older, perhaps in his 40s, with a heavy build and military-style haircut. A third man in the back seat was constantly checking his phone and looking around nervously. Sarah's instincts, sharpened by months of combat, told her this wasn't a coincidence. She had learned to trust these feelings during her time overseas, where the ability to sense danger often meant the difference between life and death. The way the men were dressed, their body language, and the deliberate nature of their surveillance all suggested this was a planned encounter. Without appearing to change her routine, Sarah began implementing counter-surveillance measures she had been trained to use. She varied her pace slightly, took an unexpected turn down a side street, and used reflective surfaces in store windows to monitor the vehicle's movements. Each time she changed direction, the sedan adjusted its position to maintain visual contact. As Sarah entered a more isolated section of the neighborhood where streetlights were fewer and houses sat further back from the road, the sedan suddenly accelerated and pulled alongside her. The windows rolled down, revealing the three occupants she had been observing. The man in the passenger seat held what appeared to be a handgun, though he kept it low and out of sight from any potential witnesses. "Hey there, lady," the driver called out with a menacing grin. "Why don't you get in the car? We just want to talk to you." Sarah continued jogging, maintaining her composure while quickly assessing her options. The street was deserted, with no other pedestrians or vehicles in sight. The nearest house was at least 100 yards away, and thick trees lined both sides of the road, providing potential cover but also concealment for her attackers. "Come on, don't make this harder than it needs to be," the passenger said, now allowing the gun to become more visible. "We know you live alone in that apartment complex. We know your schedule. We've been watching you for weeks." The revelation that these men had been conducting surveillance on her for an extended period sent a chill down Sarah's spine. This wasn't a random crime of opportunity. Someone had specifically targeted her, though she couldn't immediately understand why. Her mind raced through possibilities. Could this be related to her military service? Had someone discovered her identity and role in classified missions? "We're not going to hurt you if you cooperate," the third man spoke up from the back seat. "We just need you to come with us and answer some questions. There are people who want to know about some of the places you've been and things you've seen." Now Sarah understood. This was an intelligence operation, likely conducted by foreign agents or criminal organizations seeking information about her missions. The professional nature of their surveillance and their knowledge of her background confirmed her suspicions. These weren't ordinary criminals looking for money or committing random acts of violence. Sarah knew she had to make a decision quickly. The men clearly expected her to comply out of fear, assuming that a lone woman would be helpless against three armed assailants. They had chosen their location carefully, waiting until she was isolated and vulnerable. Their confidence suggested they had done this before and expected the same result, a terrified victim who would submit rather than resist. What these men didn't know was that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had targeted someone who had spent years training for exactly these types of situations. Sarah's calm exterior masked a tactical mind that was already formulating a response plan. Her apparent vulnerability was about to become their greatest disadvantage. As the sedan slowed to match her jogging pace, Sarah noticed additional details that would prove crucial in the next few minutes. The driver was wearing a seatbelt, which would limit his mobility. The passenger with the gun was holding it in his right hand while using his left to steady himself against the car door. The man in the back seat was positioned directly behind the driver, giving him limited angles of attack. Sarah's years of training had taught her that the first few seconds of any confrontation were critical. The element of surprise, combined with decisive action, often determined the outcome before opponents could react. She had used this principle successfully in numerous combat situations overseas. The car continued to pace her as the passenger became more insistent. "Last chance, lady. Get in the car now, or we're going to have to do this the hard way." Sarah appeared to slow down, as if considering their demand. She moved closer to the vehicle, her hands visible and seemingly empty. To the men in the car, it looked like their intimidation tactics were working. The woman appeared to be accepting her situation and preparing to comply with their demands. They had no idea they were about to discover what years of Navy SEAL training could accomplish when applied by someone fighting for her life. Sarah moved closer to the sedan, her movements deliberate and measured. The three men inside relaxed slightly, believing their intimidation tactics had succeeded. The passenger lowered his guard momentarily, shifting the gun to a more casual position as he prepared to open the door for their assumed victim. In that instant, Sarah struck with the precision and speed that had made her legendary among her SEAL teammates. Her right hand shot through the open passenger window, grabbing the gunman's wrist and twisting it with such force that the crack of breaking bones was audible even over the car's engine. The weapon clattered to the pavement as the man screamed in pain. Before the other occupants could react, Sarah used her left hand to grab the passenger's throat, applying pressure to specific points that her combat training had taught her would cause immediate disorientation. The man's eyes bulged as he struggled to breathe, his broken wrist making him incapable of defending himself effectively. The driver frantically reached for something in the center console, but Sarah was already moving. She released her grip on the passenger and vaulted through the window with an agility that defied belief. Her combat boots connected solidly with the driver's chest, sending him crashing back against his seat with enough force to crack the side window. The third man in the back seat finally overcame his shock and lunged forward, producing a knife from his jacket. Sarah twisted in the confined space of the car's interior, demonstrating the close-quarters combat skills that had kept her alive in countless dangerous situations. She caught his wrist as the blade swept toward her, redirecting the momentum while driving her elbow into his solar plexus. The knife-wielding attacker doubled over, gasping for air, but Sarah wasn't finished. She used the man's own forward momentum against him, grabbing his jacket and pulling him forward while driving her knee upward. The impact sent him sprawling across the back seat, temporarily stunned. The driver, recovering from the initial kick to his chest, managed to pull a second handgun from the center console. As he raised the weapon toward Sarah, she noticed the movement in her peripheral vision. Years of combat experience had taught her to maintain awareness of multiple threats simultaneously, even while engaged with one opponent. Sarah dropped low in the car seat, causing the driver's shot to go wide and shatter the rear window. The sound of gunfire echoed through the quiet neighborhood, though no witnesses were visible on the deserted street. She grabbed the driver's gun hand, using both her hands to control the weapon while driving her shoulder into his ribs. The driver was larger and stronger than Sarah, but her training had taught her to use leverage and technique to overcome physical disadvantages. She twisted his wrist while pushing the gun toward the car's roof, keeping the muzzle pointed away from herself and the surrounding area where innocent civilians might be present. As they struggled for control of the weapon, the passenger with the broken wrist attempted to retrieve his dropped gun from outside the vehicle. Moving with his left hand, he managed to grasp the weapon despite his injury. Sarah saw the movement and knew she had seconds to act before facing multiple armed opponents in the confined space. Using a technique she had perfected during urban combat training, Sarah released her grip on the driver's gun hand and instead grabbed his head, driving it downward into the steering wheel with tremendous force. The impact stunned him long enough for her to snatch the weapon from his loosened grip. The passenger outside the car was raising his recovered pistol when Sarah spun toward him, the driver's gun now in her hands. Her marksmanship training took over as muscle memory guided her movements. She fired once, the bullet striking the passenger's shoulder and spinning him away from the vehicle. The man collapsed behind the car, his weapon skittering across the asphalt. The third attacker in the back seat had recovered from the knee strike and was reaching into his jacket for what Sarah assumed was another weapon. She pivoted in the driver's seat, keeping the gun trained on him while maintaining awareness of the other two opponents' positions. "Don't move," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to life-or-death situations. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The man in the back seat froze, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. The confident criminals who had expected to easily intimidate a lone woman now found themselves facing someone whose skills far exceeded anything they had encountered. Sarah quickly assessed her situation. One attacker was wounded and down behind the vehicle. The driver was semi-conscious and slumped over the steering wheel. The third man was momentarily controlled but still represented a potential threat. She needed to secure the scene and gather information about who had sent these men and why they had targeted her. "Who sent you?" Sarah demanded, keeping the gun pointed at the remaining conscious attacker. "What organization are you working for?" The man in the back seat remained silent, though his nervous glances toward his wounded companion suggested he was weighing his options. Sarah recognized the look of someone trying to decide whether to comply or attempt escape. "Listen carefully," Sarah said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. "I've spent the last 18 months dealing with people much more dangerous than you. I know techniques for extracting information that would make you very uncomfortable. You can answer my questions voluntarily, or we can do this the hard way." The threat wasn't empty. Sarah's training had included interrogation resistance and counter-interrogation techniques. She knew how to apply psychological pressure and, if necessary, physical persuasion to obtain information from uncooperative subjects. Before the man could respond, the driver began to regain consciousness, moaning and slowly lifting his head from the steering wheel. Sarah immediately shifted her attention to him, while keeping the gun positioned to cover both remaining threats. "You're going to tell me who you work for and why you've been watching me," Sarah told the driver. "Start talking." The driver looked at Sarah with a mixture of pain and amazement. Blood trickled from his forehead where it had impacted the steering wheel, and his breathing was labored from the shoulder strike to his ribs. "We don't know anything," he gasped. "We were just hired to grab you and bring you to a location. They didn't tell us who you were or what this was about." Sarah studied his face, using skills learned during intelligence gathering to assess whether he was telling the truth. His body language and vocal patterns suggested genuine ignorance about the larger operation, but she needed more information. "Who hired you?" she pressed. "How did they contact you? What were you supposed to do with me once you reached this location?" The sound of sirens in the distance indicated that someone had heard the gunfire and called police. Sarah knew she had limited time to gather intelligence before law enforcement arrived, and the scene became complicated by official procedures. "There was a man," the driver said, clearly in pain but recognizing that cooperation was his best option. "He approached us at a bar in Norfolk 3 weeks ago, said he needed some people grabbed, and brought to a warehouse near the port. Paid us $5,000 up front with another $5,000 promised when we delivered." The back seat passenger finally spoke up, apparently deciding that silence was no longer protecting him. "The guy knew things about us. Our criminal records, where we lived, who our families were. It wasn't really a choice to refuse." This revelation confirmed Sarah's suspicion that the operation was more sophisticated than it initially appeared. Someone with access to detailed background information and significant financial resources had orchestrated her kidnapping. The fact that they had recruited local criminals rather than using professional operatives suggested they wanted the operation to appear like random street crime. Sarah's military experience told her this was likely a foreign intelligence operation designed to capture and interrogate her about classified missions. The location near Norfolk's port facilities would provide easy access to ships that could transport her out of the country before authorities could respond. "Describe this man who hired you," Sarah demanded. "Height, weight, accent, any distinguishing features." "Medium height, maybe 5'10", the driver replied. "European accent, but I couldn't place it exactly. Well-dressed, expensive watch. Had a scar on his left cheek, about 3 inches long." The sirens were getting closer, and Sarah could see flashing lights reflecting off buildings several blocks away. She needed to make quick decisions about how to handle the situation when police arrived. These men were criminals, but they were also victims of a larger conspiracy targeting her military service. Turning them over to local law enforcement might compromise any investigation into the foreign intelligence operation behind the kidnapping attempt. Sarah made a tactical decision that drew on her experience with joint operations between military and civilian agencies. She would provide enough information to ensure these immediate threats were neutralized while protecting the classified aspects of her background that had made her a target. As the first police cruiser rounded the corner with lights flashing, Sarah carefully placed the gun on the vehicle's roof and stepped back with her hands visible. She knew that arriving officers would see an apparent crime scene with armed individuals and needed to immediately identify herself as a victim rather than a perpetrator. I'm Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, United States Navy, she called out clearly as the police car approached. I was attacked by these three individuals and defended myself. I am a military service member and will need to contact my chain of command regarding this incident. The responding officers approached cautiously, taking in the scene of obvious violence and the wounded man behind the vehicle. Sarah maintained her position with hands visible, demonstrating the calm professionalism that had characterized her military service. What happened next would determine whether the larger conspiracy behind this kidnapping attempt could be unraveled or whether those responsible would simply send more operatives to complete their mission. Officer Michael Rodriguez was a 10-year veteran of the Virginia Beach Police Department, but the scene that greeted him that evening was unlike anything he had encountered in his career. A woman in jogging attire stood calmly beside a sedan where three men were in various states of injury and distress. One man lay groaning behind the vehicle with what appeared to be a shoulder wound. Another was slumped semi-conscious over the steering wheel, and a third sat in the back seat with his hands raised. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where I can see them," Officer Rodriguez called out, his weapon drawn but not directly pointed at Sarah. "Officer, I'm Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, United States Navy, serial number 472-9586, Sarah responded clearly. "I was jogging when these three individuals attempted to kidnap me at gunpoint. I defended myself using appropriate force. There may be national security implications to this incident that require military intelligence involvement." Rodriguez noticed the professional manner in which Sarah presented herself. Her calm demeanor, precise speech, and immediate identification suggested someone with military or law enforcement training. The way she stood with perfect posture despite having obviously been in a violent confrontation indicated discipline and experience. "Can you show me some identification?" Rodriguez asked, maintaining his cautious approach while his partner, Officer Janet Wilson, secured the scene and called for additional backup and medical assistance. Sarah slowly reached into her jacket pocket and produced her military identification card and Virginia driver's license. Officer Rodriguez examined the documents carefully, noting that the military ID listed her as an active-duty Navy officer with security clearances that indicated special operations involvement. "Lieutenant Martinez, can you walk me through what happened here?" Rodriguez asked, holstering his weapon as the immediate threat appeared to be neutralized. Sarah provided a concise but thorough account of the evening's events, from noticing she was being followed to the attempted kidnapping and her defensive response. She emphasized that the attackers had demonstrated knowledge of her personal schedule and residence, suggesting organized surveillance rather than random crime. "They mentioned that someone hired them specifically to capture me and bring me to a location near the Norfolk port," Sarah explained. "This appears to be a planned operation targeting my military service rather than a typical criminal act." Officer Wilson approached after completing her initial assessment of the three suspects. "The guy behind the car has a through gunshot wound to the shoulder. Paramedics are en route. The driver has a possible concussion and some bruised ribs. The third one appears uninjured but won't say anything without a lawyer." As if on cue, the wounded man behind the car began speaking rapidly, apparently deciding that cooperation was his best chance for lenient treatment. "Look, we didn't know what we were getting into," he said, his voice strained with pain. "The guy who hired us said it was just supposed to be a simple grab. He never said anything about her being some kind of soldier." Rodriguez looked between Sarah and the wounded suspect, beginning to understand the magnitude of what had occurred. "Lieutenant Martinez, given the potential national security aspects you mentioned, I think we need to contact federal authorities and your military chain of command." Sarah nodded, appreciating the officer's recognition that this incident extended beyond local criminal jurisdiction. "I need to contact my commanding officer at Naval Special Warfare Command. They'll coordinate with appropriate federal agencies regarding the intelligence aspects of this operation." Within 30 minutes, the scene had transformed from a local crime into a multi-agency investigation. Federal agents from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service arrived to take custody of the suspects and evidence. Sarah's commanding officer, Captain Patricia Hayes, arrived personally to assess the situation and coordinate with civilian authorities. Captain Hayes was a seasoned officer who had spent 25 years in naval intelligence and special operations. She understood immediately that the kidnapping attempt represented a serious breach of operational security that could compromise other personnel and ongoing missions. "Lieutenant Martinez, are you injured?" Captain Hayes asked, conducting her own assessment of Sarah's condition. "No significant injuries, ma'am," Sarah replied. "Some minor bruising from the physical altercation, but nothing requiring medical attention." "Good. Now, I need you to think carefully about anything unusual you've noticed in the past few weeks. Any sense that you were being watched, any changes in your routine, any contacts from unknown individuals." Sarah considered the question thoughtfully. "Ma'am, I did notice some unusual activity around my apartment complex about 2 weeks ago. A utility van that seemed to be parked in the same location for several days. And I had the feeling I was being followed on a couple of occasions, but nothing concrete enough to report." The federal agents had begun interrogating the 3 suspects separately, using techniques designed to identify inconsistencies in their stories and develop leads on the larger operation. The wounded man, seeking medical attention and reduced charges, was proving most cooperative. Agent Rebecca Foster from NCIS took the lead in questioning him. "Tell me everything you remember about the man who hired you. Every detail, no matter how small." "He knew too much about us," the suspect said, wincing as paramedics treated his shoulder wound. "Not just our names and records, but personal stuff. Where my kids go to school, what my ex-wife does for work." He made it clear that refusing wasn't really an option. This pattern confirmed what intelligence analysts suspected: a foreign operation using coercion and blackmail to recruit local assets. The level of detailed personal information suggested sophisticated intelligence gathering capabilities. "Did he provide any equipment or specific instructions about how to conduct the kidnapping?" Agent Foster continued. "He gave us photos of the target and her daily schedule. Knew when she went jogging, what route she usually took, when she'd be most vulnerable. He wanted it to look like a random crime. Told us to make it seem like a robbery gone wrong if anyone investigated." Agent Foster exchanged glances with Captain Hayes. The level of surveillance indicated a well-funded operation with significant resources dedicated to targeting Sarah specifically. Over the following hours, the investigation began to reveal the scope of the threat. The warehouse near Norfolk Port was raided by a joint federal task force, revealing equipment consistent with an interrogation facility and documents suggesting plans to transport a captive by ship to an unknown destination. Sarah was debriefed extensively about her recent missions and any classified information that foreign intelligence services might seek to obtain. Her deployment to Afghanistan had involved several high-value operations that could be of significant interest to hostile nations. "Lieutenant, based on your mission history and the sophistication of this operation, we believe you were targeted for interrogation about specific classified activities," Captain Hayes explained during a secure briefing. This level of planning and resources suggests state-sponsored intelligence gathering. The implications were sobering. If foreign agents were willing to conduct kidnapping operations on American soil to target special operations personnel, other service members could be at risk. The incident triggered a comprehensive review of security protocols for SEAL team members and their families. 3 days later, the investigation had identified the operation as likely originating from a foreign intelligence service seeking information about recent special operations in Afghanistan. The European man who had recruited the local criminals had disappeared, apparently warned by Confederates about the failed kidnapping attempt. Sarah was assigned additional security measures and relocated to a secure housing facility while threat assessments were completed. The experience had reinforced her appreciation for the training that had saved her life, but also highlighted the ongoing dangers faced by special operations personnel even after returning from deployment. During her debriefing with military psychologists, Sarah reflected on how her SEAL training had prepared her not just for combat overseas, but for threats that could emerge anywhere. The physical skills were important, she told Dr. Jennifer Walsh, but the mental preparation was what really made the difference. Years of training to stay calm under pressure, to assess threats quickly, and to act decisively when necessary. The 3 local criminals were ultimately charged with attempted kidnapping, assault with deadly weapons, and conspiracy. Their cooperation with federal investigators led to reduced sentences, but they still faced significant prison time for their roles in the operation. The broader investigation continued for months, with federal agencies working to identify other members of the Foreign Intelligence Network and assess whether additional military personnel had been targeted. Sarah's successful defense had not only protected classified information but had provided valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities and methods. 6 months later, Sarah was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for her actions during the kidnapping attempt. The citation, carefully worded to avoid revealing classified details, recognized her extraordinary heroism and decisive action in neutralizing a significant threat to national security while protecting sensitive military information. During the awards ceremony, Admiral Robert Shun, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, spoke about the incident's broader significance. Lieutenant Martinez's actions exemplify the highest traditions of the Navy SEALs. Her courage, skill, and dedication to protecting national security serve as an inspiration to all who serve in special operations. Sarah's experience became a case study at SEAL training facilities, used to teach new operators about threats they might face at home and the importance of maintaining vigilance even in apparently safe environments. Her tactical response was analyzed and incorporated into defensive training curricula. The incident also led to enhanced security protocols for special operations personnel and their families. Background investigations were expanded, housing security was improved, and new procedures were established for reporting suspicious surveillance or contact attempts. For Sarah, the experience reinforced her commitment to military service while highlighting the ongoing sacrifices made by special operations personnel. The skills that had seemed so demanding during training had proven their value in the most concrete way possible. They had literally saved her life and protected national security. Years later, when asked about that evening in Virginia Beach, Sarah would emphasize the importance of training and preparation. "People sometimes ask if I was scared," she would say. "Fear is a natural response to danger, but training teaches you to channel that fear into effective action. Every hour spent in preparation, every scenario practiced, every skill developed, it all mattered when the moment came." The three men who had believed they could intimidate and capture a woman jogging alone had discovered the hard way that appearances can be deceiving. They had encountered someone whose training, skills, and determination far exceeded their expectations, and their failure had protected not just Sarah, but potentially countless others who might have been targeted in similar operations. Sarah continued her military career, eventually rising to the rank of commander and taking on leadership roles in special operations training and development. Her experience that night in Virginia Beach became a defining moment that shaped her understanding of the ongoing nature of service and sacrifice in protecting national security. The story served as a reminder that threats to military personnel could emerge anywhere, at any time, but also demonstrated that proper training and preparation could overcome even the most dangerous situations. For the Navy SEAL community, it became a powerful example of how their training prepared them not just for foreign battlefields, but for protecting themselves and their country wherever duty called.